You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik, a show to help professional moms in survival mode to take hold of their lives and thrive. If you're ready to take powerful action to create your best life, then this is the show for you. I'm your host, Dr. Prianca Naik, board-certified internal medicine physician and certified life coach. Now let's get to it and dive in. You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, episode number 48. Hello, I am so happy to have you here today. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in, my listeners. We are approaching 1 year of this podcast. I am so excited. It took me a long time. Well, maybe not that long, but I was thinking about recording a podcast probably for a couple of years before I actually went and did it. But everything starts with a thought. And I am just so grateful that you're here listening. Welcome to any new listeners, and a shout out to my loyal listeners who subscribe. And if you're not subscribing, definitely subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast, Apple or iTunes or sorry, that's the same thing, Spotify or wherever else. This series that I'm doing on dealing with difficult and hard times is so near and dear to my heart because the real talk, right, in the title of this podcast, which I discussed on last week's episode, is where I want to tackle issues that people aren't necessarily talking about. And then, unfortunately, women are left to feel so isolated, right? And so I want you to know that you are not alone in any of your problems. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're a high achieving type A mom working a high power job, probably exhausted, maybe fatigued, struggling with burnout. You've checked all the boxes for success in your life, and yet somehow maybe you're finding yourself dissatisfied, but you do not have to feel exhausted anymore. There is a burnout-free life, a life where you're confident, you have peace of mind, and you're no longer dealing with the chronic stress that can really take over your mind and your body. And that is possible for you, okay? Because it has been for me and my clients. With a little bit of work, in 90 days or less, you can be out of burnout and enjoying your life again. Check out my free on-demand masterclass, 4 steps to overcome burnout, get rid of overwhelm, and finally get your peace of mind back. The link is in the show notes. So diving into today's topic, which is part 2 of a 3-part series on dealing with difficult times. So last week, in the last episode, we talked about categorizing hardships in life as common hard, which are just like regular problems that people talk about, hard, which are a bit harder, usually within the realm of a big change, but also within the normal limits, what we consider normal. And this is also talked about. And then finally, the out there hard, which are the more taboo topics that you might feel ashamed or too painful to discuss with your friends. And if you haven't listened to that episode 47, I highly encourage you to go back and do that before listening to today's episode. So last week I talked about breaking things down into those 3 categories because categories really take away the sting and the burn of certain situations. Today, I'm actually going to walk you through processing pain, processing the hard times, how to actually deal with difficult times in a way that allows you to actually have peace of mind no matter what, right? And that would be so great because when hard stuff comes up, often our brains are spinning out. They're going into survival mode. We're trying to troubleshoot. Our brains won't turn off, and it can be exhausting. I would recommend grabbing a pen and a sheet of paper to take notes on this episode. It's got a lot of pearls here that are going to help you when shit hits the fan. And it always does because this is life, and life is beautiful, but also can be really painful. And that is the reality, right? Regardless of Instagram and all that and social media. And if you're driving, listen to this, maybe check out the show notes later or take a second listen where you can write stuff down. I'm going to get into mindset work and some actionable tips today. Today, I'm going to talk about mindset work and some actionable tips we can take when times get hard. I've got about 8 or 9 tips here, and then next week I'm going to dive into mindfulness practice as it relates to difficult times. So, one thing we can remember in our mindset work, one thing we can keep in mind is that hard times happen. This is a part of life, and nothing has gone wrong, even if it feels like it. Even if something terrible is happening, maybe one of the third category things, right? The out there hard where you feel alone, like the spouse cheating, or my husband doesn't want to have sex with me, or I just found out my husband is an alcoholic. Those times, those are so rough. But truly being able to realize that life is 50-50, good and bad, and these things happen. You can take on a mantra of this is part of my journey and is bringing me to where I need to go next. Now, if you're thinking, what the hell is she talking about? Stop sugarcoating things. I'm not. What I'm saying is that we have a choice to decide how we want to deal with hard things. And we can either make life harder for ourselves or we can actually empower ourselves to decide how we want to think about things. Oftentimes, people see later on after they're already through the crisis that this brought them to where they needed to be. So if we can do that ahead of time, it can lessen the pain of the actual tough time. And by doing this, we can make peace with what's happening that we cannot control. And remember that hard times give us a barometer for the good. Number 2, always remember that hard times are temporary. Nothing lasts forever. And the only constant in life is change, right? And as I mentioned in a previous episode about mantras, right? This too shall pass. And that saying has been so powerful in my life when I feel overwhelmed or that something major is coming along. How am I going to get through this? I know that it's not going to last forever. This also helps us to not get overly sucked in to the misery of a tough time because the more we get sucked in, the worse we feel. If we can remember that there will be relief at some point, we're going to feel so much better. I remember the 3 years I took off between undergrad and medical school. I was in my 20s. And of course, I didn't have the best perspective because most 20-year-olds don't. And that was such a hard time for me. And it felt like it was never going to end. I felt so lost. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, with my career. And yet it totally passed. It was temporary. And I can retrospectively look at that now and realize, right, that that only lasted for a certain amount of time. And I encourage you to do the same. Take a moment to think about, pause the podcast if you need, a hard time that you went through that felt so crappy at the time, but it lasted for X amount of months, right? Or maybe even days or weeks. Who knows? It could be that short. Number 3, always remember one step at a time. One step at a time, 1 hour at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time. First of all, the experience of our life is happening right now. I actually don't plan super far in advance for regular things other than travel or meeting up with friends who live far away because I'm dealing with and experiencing the now. And as we know, the universe or God, as we know it, often laughs at our plans and throws a wrench in them, right? So, really thinking far in advance often isn't helpful, especially when you're in a crisis mode. Really take it one baby step at a time because when something makes us feel like we're overloaded, we can really care for ourselves by taking it in baby steps to cope or solve for, meaning come up with a plan and then maybe take action. And along with this comes number 4, my 4th tip, which is to take the pressure off. This difficult time is not going to be solved in this minute, in this moment. So, how are you going to create peace in your brain to make it more tolerable, more bearable? Easy does it, right? That's a saying I mentioned on episode 45. Easy does it really helps us to ease up on ourselves. We can just take the pressure off. Know that you are figuring things out. Know that you are okay. You are safe, or you will make yourself okay and safe, meaning you're going to figure it out. You're going to be okay no matter what. You may not have all of the answers to whatever hardship or problem today, but you're going to solve it. And there is no pressure to figure it all out in this current moment. You don't need to create extra pressure. There is time. My fifth tip is what I call, and this is actually an insider sneak peek inside my program, which is preemptive processing. That's my own system of processing where you take your future self, how you would feel, what you would think, and you really transpose that on the present moment. So imagine if this current crisis, if it didn't matter as much, right? It won't matter as much. It's not going to sting as much in a few days from now, or a week from now, or a month from now, or a year from now. You're not going to have the strong emotions that you have right now in the future. So if you can just realize that, you can acknowledge that and take that future attitude, take that and transpose that onto the current moment, then you're really able to put things in perspective. And again, not get sucked in and create that extra layer of suffering by feeling like the crappy feeling that you're feeling now is going to last forever. And I think a really great example of this is the normal hard, right? Is postpartum when you have a baby and a newborn doesn't sleep at all, right? And I think with the second child, you realize everything's a phase. But often with the first child, you don't know it's a phase. You don't know what's coming. You feel like it's going to last forever. But that postpartum phase is a great example of this too shall pass. And also, you could preemptive process. Well, it's too late now. We're all moms here and we've been through our first child. But ideally, right, that we could know that, hey, a year from now, well, actually, the preemptive processing we do with a second child, because at that point, you're like, okay, a year from now, my baby's going to be sleeping through the night, etc. Number 6 is knowing that pain won't kill us. Well, it usually won't. There is something called Takotsubo's cardiomyopathy, which is literally a broken heart, but I'm not going to get into that. But the pain won't kill us. I'm going to dive into in next week's episode, during which I talk about mindfulness and its role in helping us cope with difficult times. Number 7, accepting that this is a tough time. Acceptance of this tough time, meaning that shit happens, right? Life gets truly tough. And people are dealing with all kinds of hardship, like we discussed in the previous episode. So accept it as it is happening. And this doesn't have to define you. And don't get me wrong, acceptance doesn't mean that you're accepting something bad and you're good with it and you're going to keep dealing with it. It just means that don't fight the force. Accept that it is happening and you do get to take action as you see fit. Number 8, acceptance of the fact that we can only control ourselves. Trying to control our circumstances, trying to control what is outside of us does not work. A great example of this is addiction. We cannot control addicts. We cannot control how much they use, how much they drink. We can only control and we can only decide in what capacity we want to interact with them. And we can control our own boundaries. But again, we cannot control them. We cannot control anything outside of us. So accepting that can create peace of mind. Number 9, I call this anti-isolation. As I talked about last week, you are not alone in your problems. There are other people who are dealing with the same thing. So don't isolate yourself. It just adds an extra layer of pain on top of the already suffering from the hardship itself. Seek help with a therapist, a coach, friends, family, loved ones, support groups, wherever you can find it and you feel comfortable. If you don't try, you'll never know. I myself have actually gotten so much support in online physician mom groups. They have been a godsend for me when I felt like I was struggling and I was all alone. And I was not, let me tell you. Number 10, self compassion. We must practice self compassion. We cannot blame ourselves for everything. And I feel like that is something that we do. And truly, this is something we should all be doing in general, but especially when life is tough, giving ourselves grace when we're struggling or simply having a bad day. You know, those days where you're tired from work, you've got a lot of kids' activities, or maybe your kids are giving you a tough time, maybe you raise your voice, and you get to say sorry to your kids and have compassion for yourself, knowing that we're human beings and we're imperfect inherently, and truly embracing our human experience, the experience of being human and imperfect, for better or for worse. And this really helps take away that extra layer of pain that we add on to ourselves when we're beating ourselves up for not being perfect. And of course, we know I have 2 episodes on perfectionism. The most recent one was episode 46 on ending perfectionism. So check that one out if you need help in that area. Number 11, thinking about lessons that this hard time might be teaching you. So often, years later, after after one has already emerged from a hard time, he or she might be able to look back and say, yeah, that hard time taught me this. I'm grateful for that hard time. But instead of waiting several years to do that, why don't we ask ourselves in this moment when we're dealing with something difficult, what is this teaching me? What am I learning? How might this serve me in the future? And I think by shifting our perspective on that, we're able to even shift to gratitude for the hardship. Now, this is a stretch. This tip is one of the more difficult ones, so I don't suggest it to start. But if you're versed in doing this work, I highly recommend this because it can really help you make peace with some of the tougher times in your life. And I will tell you that some of the things that have happened in my life, the darker times or moments, I truly am grateful for what they've taught me and how they make me who I am today. Number 12. This is this is self-care and practical tips. So this is just well, not easy, but these are simple concrete things you can do. Get enough sleep, take a cat nap if you need, eat properly, hydrate, work out, take a walk, call a friend, get a massage, do things that might make you feel better, especially when you're having a tough time. Tip number 13 is believing in yourself and the power of your action mode. And I know you listeners out there, I know you are great at taking action. And believing in yourself, saying to yourself, I can do this. Think of all the hard times that you have emerged from before today. Take a moment to brainstorm 1 to 5 tough times. And you're still here, you're still kicking. And know that you can solve problems. You are intelligent and resourceful. I know you are. You're a professional mom. And you can get into action mode when you decide. And when we decide a course of action, we start taking action and we figure out what to do next, we feel empowered and we're no longer in victim mode. And that is so helpful when we're dealing with a difficult situation. Number 14, simplify. So keep things basic and simple when you're struggling with a tough time. This means saying no to extra projects, being super picky about who you're spending time with, how you're spending your time. And this is really important in general, honestly, because our time is so precious, our time and energy. We don't have any of it to waste. But this is crucial when you're dealing with something hard. Tip number 15 is to take time. Take time for yourself to stop and smell the roses, smell a candle, whatever you need to do. Take some time to yourself. This will help you to care for yourself. Get a breath, get a minute to get yourself together, to have a little bit of peace and silence, to figure out what you're going to do next. You need that space. And I will also tell you to take a personal day or two from work if you need. The job is not going to be there at your deathbed. The job is not going to be caring for you. All right. Jobs are important, but it's really critical that we think of ourselves as human beings, as moms, separate from our work, though our work is important. Number 16, and this is my last tip. I know this has been a meteor episode. Finding joy in the hard times. So how do we find joy in hard times? One really simple way to do this, and free as well, is nature. Any way that we can get in touch with nature. Literally going outside, taking a walk, open your window, smelling some fresh air. If you can't do that, maybe a lighted candle, hugging your children. That is one of the most beautiful ways to cultivate joy and peace. Our kids love us unconditionally. It is the most beautiful thing. And really having wonder with our children, right? Because they say and do the darndest things. It's amazing the things children say and do if you stop to notice and really soak them in. Humor. So watching funny shows, funny movies, calling your friend who's funny. Maybe you watch YouTube videos or you have some social media person who's funny that you like to watch. Do that. Laugh at what your kids say, what they do, or laugh with them. Do a dance. I love this one. I'm always talking about this because I do this normally anyway, but dance like nobody's watching in your kitchen, in your bedroom, in your bathroom, wherever, at the stoplight, because this truly cultivates joy and a sense of freedom and feeling carefree. Now, realize that with all of these suggestions, what I'm talking about, you have the power to decide and cultivate the thoughts and the feelings that you want in any given time. So, doing a dance is a great example of this. Also, you can hang out with your friends. You can do something just for you, whatever that might be, getting your nails done, a massage, a facial, whatever is fun for you. For me, I like taking time to read or Netflix, or I like to take myself out to eat, which brings me to another example. Go to your favorite restaurant or other favorite place, wherever that might be. There is a lot of material in today's episode. It really shows us how we don't have to be victims when bad things happen to us and how we can truly empower ourselves by shifting the way we think, shifting how we feel, and taking action to get us through these hard times. Do not get overwhelmed with all of the tips I've talked about today. Pick a couple of things that you would like to try when you're dealing with a difficult time. See what a difference practicing these strategies will make. And I promise you, they will. They truly will. Believe me, these practices have gotten me through some of the most difficult times in my life so far. And all the while I struggled, I truly was finding my own peace of mind and enjoying my life. People call me resilient. They call me strong. But I will tell you that it's not necessarily that this all comes naturally to me. I have cultivated this over time with how I live my life. And that is why I am sharing all of these gems with you today. And I know it's going to help you. Feel free to message me on Instagram at Dr. Prianca, DoctorPrianca. No Y or no K. It's a non-traditional spelling. Let me know if you enjoyed this series this episode on our 3-part series of dealing with hardship. And next week, I'm going to talk about mindfulness practice as it relates to dealing with hardship. So, as we've talked about today, life can get hard and it's beautiful too. And if we can learn to deal with the hard times and we can really live a life with intention, we can be free of constant exhaustion and fatigue and have more confidence and peace of mind. And you can have this with a little bit of work and not much time. You can be out of fatigue, exhaustion, and burnout and truly find peace and enjoy your life every day. This is what my clients do inside my program, Overcome Burnout for Good. And to learn more, to learn 4 steps to overcome burnout, get rid of overwhelm, and finally get your peace of mind back, check out my free on-demand masterclass with exactly that title. Thank you so much for tuning in. The link is going to be in the show notes for all of those things, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik. If you are ready to get unstuck and out of survival mode to live your best life, I want to invite you to book a free 30-minute consultation call with me. To get started, visit priancanaikmdcoaching.as.me. Link in the show notes.